Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Thursday, about 6:40 a.m. I slept in a little bit today, caught up on some sleep, but now I'm up. Time to start the day, and I'm excited for this weekend. I have something going on at my house this weekend that I'll probably tell you guys about on Monday. Um, but it's actually something, I don't know. It's one of those unique things you never think is going to happen to you. And I don't know. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. I'll tell you guys about it. But that does mean, like I said, probably no stream. Although it's possible Sunday late I could stream, which I might try to do. Otherwise, I'm going to be very short on things. But like I said, I'm not supposed to stress about this stuff. So, yeah. I was able to play a couple PBE games. Um, Probably the most fun moment I've had so far, by the way, was I had an opener where I had a Gangplank and I got the augment solo leveling, and my Gangplank had a Titan's Resolve on it, and that Gangplank was able to solo everyone's board by himself. So I got the max amount of XP you could get from solo leveling, and he was farming gold while he did it. I think I farmed like 8 or 9 gold. So, the PvE round comes around and I'm like almost level 6, 40 gold with solo leveling. That was kind of neat. It was just a Gangplank 1. It wasn't even a Gangplank 2. So that was a fun augment moment. I enjoyed that. Now, the game went downhill from there, and then I lost to something that was probably too strong or whatever. But, that was a really cool moment. I enjoyed that moment. That made me smile. So hopefully you guys are finding exciting moments like that as well. Things that are like, ooh, this is pretty neat. So, yeah. Cool. All right, let's answer some questions. First question. So, a long time ago, we've talked about what a 1 cost is, and a 4 cost is, and a 5 cost is. But have we actually figured out what a 2 and a 3 cost is? So, the answer is almost. The way you can look at it is, remember, we have tanks and carries, right? A 1 cost is like the intro level tank and carry. They're like the most basic versions of spells, right? Their damage dealers just do damage usually, and, maybe have a little utility on them, but probably not. And their tanks just tank. Pretty basic. The 3 costs are the mid-game version of this. So a 3 cost is usually just a better version of a 1 cost. More stats, more damage, and a slightly flashier spell. 4 costs are the end game version of this. So again, pretty basic. They do damage, they tank, not a lot of utility on them. And generally we don't try to put a lot, like, don't get me wrong, there's going to be exceptions, right? But generally there's not a lot of utility on these champions. They are your primary, like, simplest outputs, right? That's where the tanks go that tank. That's where the damage dealers go that deal damage. And if a 1 cost, 3 cost, or 4 cost isn't able to succeed, that's a pretty big miss, right? So like Jinx not being a viable carry, if that was the case in set 14, that's a miss, right? Because she's supposed to be one of those 3 cost carries that's pretty solid to play. Now, 5 costs are where we sort of take off all the limiters and go, they can just do whatever the hell we want them to do, right? They can break the rules. They can mess up your trait web like Garen. They can scale to infinity. That's where 5 costs kind of get to break all the rules that were set by the 1, 3, and 4 costs. So that begs the question, what are 2 costs? And this is the one that, I'll be honest with you, I think we are still trying to really capture what a 2 cost is. Because 2 costs live in this awkward space in between 1 and 3 costs where, they need to be strong, but not too strong, because they're also one of the easiest things that you can 3-star and get going online pretty early. Like, the difference between a 1 cost and a 2 cost is pretty low. 1 1 costs are generally pretty possible to 3-star on 3-1. Like you can get those on your 3-1 roll down, sometimes even earlier. Whereas 2 costs, I've seen them come online as early as like 3-2, 3-3. So there's not that much of a difference when it comes to time to come online and how to activate them. But obviously the big difference here is that they cost literally double as much as 1 costs. So they can't be literally the same thing. That's incorrect. But they can't be endgame carries, because having your endgame carry come online fully itemized at 3-2, that's too early in the game, right? Like that's not really great. Now some of you might be going 1 costs. Well, the thing with 1 cost, what we've done now is that generally for 1 cost to succeed, you still have to like hit level 8, build the supporting units, get a secondary carry nowadays. We've done pretty good about that, right? Like Shaco Reroll could get pretty strong in set 14, but it's not like Shaco Reroll was soloing enemy teams. It was like, no, you needed the other Slayers, or you needed Misfortune and Braum. Like, that's a good thing. Whereas 2 costs are like right on that fine edge between them, where they're actually pretty strong and can be endgame carries, which is, scary for how early they come online. So I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what the framework is for that. But one of the things we have done is that 2 costs is where you can sneak in a lot of that utility, right? So like 2 costs are where you're going to see a lot of, they also shred and sunder, or they also, apply burn, or some of their tanks now have stuns or will heal, right? And so like if you look at KO Coliseum, you've got like Lux who's applying that shred, or you've got Janna who's applying those shields, right? So 2 costs has become the space where it's like, think of them as 1 costs with a little extra sauce. And that's kind of been the framework we've been operating under. Now, is that perfect and correct? I'm not entirely sure yet. I certainly can't be like, yep, confidently this is the best thing for the game. But I think we've gotten pretty good about it. I think they're about as good as they can be. But they're definitely, like I said, 2 costs are in a very awkward spot right now. So, hopefully that kind of answers your question. But like I said, I think generally thinking of them as 1 cost with a little extra sauce has been good for us, but it hasn't been perfect, right? Like you look at Vhagar in set 14 and it's like, yeah, I mean, he's a 1 cost in the sense that his spell is single target. The extra sauce is the way you can interact with him in Cyberboss. But did he ever really succeed as a primary carry? Not really. People tried to make him work, and there was a while where players like Dasik thought he was overpowered, but he wasn't. And turns out a single target spell in the late game, not very good. Especially single target spells that also have to go front and back. You have to do so much to make that work in the late game. They're very good in the early game. And that's why I'm very curious where champions like Ahri and Caitlyn are going to end up in the KO Coliseum, because, again, they're kind of single target. Now, at least Ahri has the, overflow damage, and Caitlyn has the AoE, but I don't know. We'll see. But, yeah, that's kind of what we had figured out about 2 and 3 costs. So, a lot of cars. There's something going on at one of these houses down here that, a lot of construction coming early. Anyway, that's kind of it. And, at least for now, that's what a 2 and 3 cost are. So, there you go. All right. Next question. Can you explain the PBE patching process? So, it's actually, we piggyback off of League and how League has set it up. But, this question was asked because it's like, well, why is it on PBE? You guys can patch every single day, but you can't on live. And so PBE, the way it works is basically we have a patch cycle, right? So let's say it's time for 14.8 to go live. Sorry, one second. Okay, so let's say it's time for 14.8 to go live. The first thing that happens is essentially what we call merge day. And this is where all of our future environments, this is our dev environments where we can work on the game, test externally, or test internally, all that jazz. And then on merge day, what happens is we take all the code that is relevant to the future patch and we move it over to what we call the live server, release server. And once it's on the release server, what happens is the PBE is set up so that every day starting on Tuesday at around noon, it takes all the changes from release and puts them on the server. Now, in order to do this, the server has to come down. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see us patch every single day, is that we don't want to bring the servers down every single day. But so that Tuesday rolls around and that all that release stuff is deployed. From there, if you're working on a patch, instead of checking in your code to future, you check it into release. And what happens is every single day, any changes you make on that release branch will go to PBE the next day at the same time. And so, let's say PBE comes out on Tuesday, we notice a bug where one of the augments is spawning minions over and over and over and filling your board with minions. Oops. So Tuesday night, we fix that and we check in the code to the release branch. Around Wednesday at like 2 in the morning, something is auto set up to basically go, okay, all the changes since the last deploy, grab them, compile them, make sure they work. And then once it does, Wednesday around noon, that build that was built at Wednesday at 2 in the morning goes live to the PBE. And that process is repeated Monday through Friday. And that's why, for example, like let's say it's Thursday, like today is the last day for the team to get check-ins for the weekend, because today they'll make changes and bug fixes and balance changes. Friday, 2 a.m., the build will happen. And then Friday around noon, that build will get deployed to PBE. But the next time that happens is Monday. So anything they do on Friday won't get deployed until Monday. Now you might be going, hey, if this is all auto done, why not deploy it on the weekends? Well, 2 reasons. One, weekend is a great time to get stable testing, and pulling the server down every day on weekends disrupts that testing. But 2, in this process, if anything goes wrong, right? Remember, that's why I said it's like done at 2 in the morning. So imagine you come in at 9 a.m. and you look at that build, and all of a sudden there's a couple lights going off that are like, uh-oh, build no worky. Someone super broke game. You need to be able to stop that deploy and make sure everything gets fixed, right? And the big part of this is making sure that there's anything in the code that's stable, right? And, when you hear that, you guys might be thinking like small bugs, but we're talking about like massive things like, oh, literally when you load up a game of League of Legends, the champions don't appear and the game doesn't function. Some of you who might be old school remember there was a bug in TFT for 9 minutes where if you started a game of TFT, none of your units could be placed or moved, and the game would never end until 24-6. And so for 9 minutes, any player who started the game within those 9 minutes was stuck in like a 2-hour-long game that they couldn't leave until it ended. That is the type of bug that PBE is meant to really, really catch so that players don't experience that level of pain. And the reason that bug happened is because we'd skipped using PBE and did a micro patch. And that's the danger of doing that, right? And so as much as we all talk about like is PBE for balance or bugs or whatever, all of that stuff is just icing on the cake. The real purpose of PBE is like deep core functionality and making sure that the live service game is still live and working. That's the main purpose of PvE. And so that first week, essentially now through next Wednesday before what we call branch cut, that's what that's mostly for. We just happen to piggyback off of it to do balance changes and stuff like that. Now, Wednesday rolls around and we have what's called branch cut. At this point, this is where the release build is locked. And it's like, this is the build. All the code that's going to go into this build is done, no more. And that's what we're going to deploy to live servers in a week. Okay. And so once that happens on our end, we can actually start working on the next patch. You know, we're already working on the next patch and trying to get that up and going. But the reason this is done is because it's like, okay, all the code's in. Now QA can just triple check that, like, is it stable? Is it ready to go out to the world? And a lot of the times behind the scene, the answer is no. It's like, okay, we have this build that we've cut. It looks good, and oops, mobile TFT can't load properly. Or there was a bit of code that went in that didn't match the standards for Google, or, you know, that we just found a major bug with one of the new skins we're adding, and it doesn't play right on this map. And so that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we have what are called stability check-ins. And this is where if you want to check something in to that build to fix those major issues, you have to get like 3 layers of permission from people who are like in charge of making sure those builds are stable. And then you have to have people check your code, because otherwise you go down this path of like, you know, fix a bug, 2 more bugs added kind of thing. It's like only the most safe, stable check-ins go in at that point. And then you have a build. And then hopefully by Monday or Tuesday, it's all ready to go. And we start shipping it out to players worldwide across the region, starting with like OCE and then across the globe until like NA's last. And so that's this whole long process. And we do that every 2 weeks, you know. So that's kind of how it works. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I told you more than I was supposed to. I don't know. Maybe these are trade secrets or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, and that's basically the process. It's like you have a 2-week patch. The first week is stabilizing the next patch while working on the next patch. Then it goes to PvE. You have a week to use PvE to stabilize it. Then you have branch cut. Then the process starts all over again. So pretty crazy, but I won't lie. I find it fun. Constant game dev every 2 weeks. It's exciting. So there you go. All right. Next question. Do you think Steam is beneficial for games? And what about a game like TFT being on there? And the person asking this was asking about things like Steam reviews, and how if a game gets really good reviews, that can be very beneficial for it, versus if they get bad reviews, that can ruin a game completely. And then also Steam charts, and like people will stop playing a game if it has low Steam chart numbers. So first off, do I think Steam is beneficial is a very broad question, but at the highest level, the answer is yes, right? Like having a marketplace that sells games and puts all your games in one spot, I think that's pretty cool. I've got a Steam library of like 300 games, and like that's small potatoes compared to some of the people I know. One of the guys I went to college still works at Valve, and he's worked there now like 18 years or something. And, you know, he would tell me 10 years ago how people had Steam libraries of like 5,000 games. So by now, that's got to be a much higher number. I'm sure he has crazy horror stories of the things that go on at Steam, because he works a lot in their like player support area as well. So yeah, he's got horror stories. But so like at the highest level, I think Steam is great. Now, a lot of the things you brought up, though, are less of a problem with Steam and more of a problem with the world today. You know, so for example, you mentioned the reviews. And it's like, sure, in theory, reviews can matter, but is it Steam's fault that the internet has turned all review sites into a place where we dogpile for nothing related to the game itself, right? Like, as an example, with Helldivers, when they made that decision that pissed everybody off, did it need 10,000 negative reviews about that one decision? Probably not. Does that defeat the purpose of those reviews? Yes. But has the internet turned that into how they have an outlet to exclaim they're unhappy with something? Yup, they sure have. Do those customers have a right to say they're unhappy? Yeah, of course, obviously. Are reviews the place I think they should do it? You know, because now all of a sudden those reviews have lost their purpose. They're not telling you how good the game is. They're just telling you they made a decision people are unhappy with. And now Steam reviews, I know people are like starting to pay for Steam reviews, and people are using those to manipulate scores and stuff like that. You know, or Steam charts. Steam charts is one of the funniest things to me, by the way, because Steam charts is like how many players are playing in the US. And then more recently, just very recently, especially with Wukong, it started getting players from other regions. And it's like, whoa, a lot of people who are living in the box that is Steam start to understand that, like, whoa, there's actually a lot of players in other regions. And these numbers are really big. Like, whoa, 500,000 players, that's a big number. Except it's not. And anyone in the actual industry is like, those numbers are small potatoes. What do you think Genshin's player numbers are? You know, Genshin's not on Steam. So it's like Steam charts have created this perception of the industry that is frankly wrong, but you get these quote unquote journalists that only look at that box because it's the only information they have, and they use it to paint their perception of reality of the industry. It's just wrong, which leads to misinformation. And so look at a game like Overwatch, right? Where it's like, what percentage of Overwatch's players are on Steam? You know, what do you think the actual percentage number is? It's certainly not 50%. Is it 10%? Maybe, but probably not. Is it 2%? Maybe, you know. Do I know the actual number? No, I don't work at Blizzard. But people look at that and they're like, Overwatch only has 40,000 players. It's like, no, it doesn't. It has much more than that. You know? So, do I think it would be beneficial for TFT to end up on Steam? I think right now the answer is no. TFT continues to be one of the best kept secrets in the industry about how successful it is. Most people don't even talk about us, for better or worse. People won't even acknowledge that we're in like, every video I watch about Riot is like, League and Valorant and Legends of Runeterra. League and Valorant and Legends of Runeterra. Maybe some 2XKO. No one ever talks about TFT. But like I said, maybe that's a good thing because people don't really know about our success. Except there's one region that does know about our success. And all of a sudden, there seem to be a lot of games coming out of that region that have some auto battler mini games and clones and stuff like that. Wonder why that is. It's almost like they're trying to match some of the success. God, I wish I could talk about this stuff. But yeah, so again, like, do I really want us to end up on Steam where 0.5% of our audience is playing on Steam so that a bunch of American YouTube journalists can go, number low? No, not really. I think we're doing just fine without it. I think we're doing okay. I don't think we need to be on Steam. But again, as a consumer and as a player, do I love Steam? Yeah, I got nothing against Steam. And the way Steam is being weaponized is not Steam's fault. So, and I will continue to go on Steam and buy games every once in a while and, you know, play those games and have a good time on my PC. So, yeah. And in fact, if anything, what I will say is I feel like the biggest thing Steam has killed is PS4 and Xbox. Or PS5 now, I guess. Because it's like, why buy these consoles if you can just play the same games on Steam and know they'll go on sale a few months later anyway. So, yeah. I feel like Xbox in particular, Steam ate their lunch. But, again, that's just kind of my opinion. So, yeah. All right, last question. Ooh, this is a meaty one. I don't know if I'll get through this in time. I'll try. How much does a typical designer contribute? You know, junior versus senior versus director, whatever. So I'll answer this question starting with like a brand new junior designer. So let's say you're what we call them P2s. You're a brand new P2 designer. You got hired at Riot and you've joined a sets pod and you get to work at Riot. Your contribution is probably, so what's happened is that set lead has probably worked with some of the higher up people like say Giovanni or me or Kent and created a plan for a set. And so let's say maybe you're working on I'll say set 20. We're not working on set 20 yet, but I'm using this abstractly. So you come out with a paper design of what set 20 looks like. And set 20 knows that they need things like a 4-cost Cho'Gath or a 3-cost Malzahar, right? It's got a whole list of things that they're going to make. And that junior designer is probably going to get assigned about 15 of those. 15, maybe 20 if they're really, really good, but somewhere in that 10 to 15 range probably. And it's their job to implement those. Now, some of those are going to be like, do exactly what the sheet says, right? Like maybe it's a 1-cost Ahri, I don't know. And the sheet says 1-cost Ahri shoots a single target spell. Okay, so you go in your engine and you build that single target Ahri and you make sure she's set up right, you make sure she plays well. And that's your job, is to make sure that works well. You know, it's not exactly creative work, but it's, you know, you still got to make sure it feels good. You do that well. But another one might be like, okay, let's go with the 4-cost Cho'Gath. But maybe the 4-cost Cho'Gath is, and again, I'm literally making this up. This isn't some weird spoiler. The 4-cost Cho'Gath is actually a melee damage dealer. And we're not exactly sure what we want the spell to be, but we want him to use things like Jeweled Gauntlet and Deathcap. Okay? And so that designer might actually be now given a problem that has some exploration to do, where it's like, ooh, I need to figure out what that kind of Cho'Gath would look like. What spell do I want to use? Do I want to use, you know, his shout? Do I want to use his bite? Do I want to do something else? Do I want to think outside the box? You know, and come up with a proposal for what that Cho'Gath could look like. And then when they have a proposal, they'll check in with their set lead and be like, how does this look? And then maybe they'll implement it and try it in game. And then they'll get feedback and it's like, oh, that Cho'Gath is like really boring for a 4-cost. Oh, back to the drawing board a little, you know. And so that's where they get to do some of their creative work. It's like you're given a fairly narrow problem, but it is still an open-ended problem. And some of the best junior designers will be like, ooh, actually I came up with this Cho'Gath that knocks people up into the air with his ult, or his whatever. And then if that knocks them below 10% health, he jumps to them and bites them out of the air. And when he does that, if they had 3 items, he also spits out one of their items. That sounds more like a 5-cost, but I'm just making shit up as I go here. And then everyone might go, oh my God, that's such a cool Cho'Gath design. Let's do it. That's exciting. And that designer gets props, you know. It's like, good job. You came up with something new and creative. Good job, you know. And then they might work on a couple traits as well. They might help fix some bugs. And they start to build up that design muscle. And so then the next set, they're a P3, they've been promoted. And now they might get, 20 champions. And of those 20, a lot more are in that 4 and 5 cost space and a lot more open. And they might also need to start working on the set mechanic, because last time they didn't touch the set mechanic, but this time they've been given the important task of the set mechanic. And then they do that well. Cool. And so then the next set they work on, it's like, wow, you're a rising star. You're doing great. We're going to have you lead a set. And so now all of a sudden, not only are they doing their share of the work, but they're also making decisions around other people's. And so now they're a P4 and they're doing their champions, because someone still has to make the rest of the champions. But they're also the ones now looking at the P2's Cho'Gath and going, ooh, is that good enough? Here's some feedback, and they're mentoring them. And then maybe you do that and you lead a couple sets and you're a good person, and now you're a P5 and you're in charge of all the set leads. And you're making sure that all the set leads are doing things. And now this is where it starts to be a little tougher, because once you hit that like principal level, what happens is you actually stop working on the game directly as much and you start working through other people, right? And so if you're a P5 set lead or lead of sets, your job is to actually help the other set leads make the right decisions. Or if you become, I don't know, someone like me, your job is to go run around and just make sure everyone's doing the right thing. And, and so then you start hitting that corporate level and yada, yada, yada. But the TLDR here is a typical, junior or mid designer is working on about a third of a set, give or take, every 3 sets, right? So you work on the set 12 pod, you do about a third of the set, and then now you're on the 15 pod. Or maybe you got moved to the 16 pod, or maybe you just finished 12 and 14 needs help. So you move over to the 14 pod and you maybe only do 5 of the champions, but they really needed the help. And you flex around. And so that's about the given scope. That doesn't even count things like augments and stuff like that. So yeah, that's generally, and like I said, I'm running out of time here, but that's about the answer. This might be a longer talk. This also might be the kind of talk where it's like, actually get some of those P2s and P3s to talk about what they do. Would be more interesting, but that's the short version. So there you go. All right, 31 minutes. I'm hitting the hill. It's Thursday. I got to get through my work days and then prep my house for what's going on this weekend, which should be fun. Yeah, I'm excited. So hopefully I'll see you guys though, and hopefully I can find time to squeeze in some PBE games. It's definitely weird during the weekday. It is. I'm supposed to be focused on the new project, and I'm trying, but man, it is hard to just not look at PBE and just like not watch any streamers and not play the game. It's very difficult for me. I'm struggling with it a little bit, to be honest with you. So, all right, that's gonna do it for me. Hope you guys have a great day. Until next time, take it easy.